All right, everybody. So our next speaker is Scott Reinert here on screen with us. Scott has more than 25 years of experience in water resources and water supply projects as a hydrogeologist and civil engineer. Currently, he serves as the Water Resources Manager at El Paso Water Utilities, where he oversees well drilling, water supply projects, and more, and water resources planning. Today, he's here to share with us the Southwest Salinity Management experience. Thank you, Scott. Over to you.
Hi, thank you very much, and I'm sorry that I can't be there to participate in the wine tasting. I guess I'll have to do a virtual taste. So glad that you all are here. We're going to talk about El Paso yesterday, today, and tomorrow. This is there's an old country and western song, 3 days where the guy's going to be lonely, yesterday, today, and tomorrow. I hope my presentation's not as sad as that song, but let's get it started. We're going to talk about El Paso's water supply back in the old West days, and ultimately how we built our water supply to our current condition and how we're planning for the future. So this starts off with a few fun facts about El Paso. We have over 300 days of sunshine. We're actually closer to Denver and Los Angeles than we are to Houston. That shows what a big state that Texas is. El Paso is very famous for cowboy boots. We have a few celebrities that are from El Paso. Stevie Nicks from Fleetwood Mac, Sharon Tate, the actress, and Liz Taylor was married here in El Paso. So one of her 8 marriages, I think, is here. So, and lastly, it is the birthplace of the margarita. So as we get started into the Old West history, we'll talk a little bit about the Butterfield Trail. This was a 2,700-mile long trail connecting St. Louis to San Francisco, and along their long journey, I think it took them about 30 days, they'd stop in El Paso to get resupplied, get some water, take a little rest. But when they came to El Paso back in that time, in the 1850s, the water supply was very primitive. There were no major pipelines, no major wells, no water treatment, anything like that. But they basically hauled water around on buckets. They had small, shallow wells next to the Rio Grande. The Rio Grande at this time was very irregular, very erratic, and it was always, when it had water, it was always full of sediment. So it was very problematic for the people to drink. So anyway, they would be hauling it around, and it was very much a premium. And I can guarantee at that point in time, they were definitely conserving water because it was hard to move around and heavy and everything. So in the 1880s, the city sold a franchise to Sylvester Watts, and he began laying out pipelines. And we had pumps, so we started building a water supply for El Paso. And I failed to mention that in 1880, that's when the railroad came to town, and we really did need to start building a better, bigger and better water supply. 1890s, you can see the Old West law enforcement, cowboys, horses, that's what they had back then. And the crimes that day were a lot of theft, cattle rustling, theft, murder. These were the law enforcement. But, you know, if we look at it from a water perspective, I'm a water resource guy. The water quality was probably also a crime. These septic tanks were next to wells, next to the cisterns. The water quality was probably did not comply with any health standards. I'm sure it did. So anyway, the due to problems, this franchise, Sylvester Watts lost their license, and we worked to get another person to start supplying water. In 1890, we began looking towards getting something other than river water, and this is where we started constructing a well. The first municipal well in El Paso was in 1890, and it's a 60-foot well that was 13 feet in diameter. And as they would dig and dig and dig, they would secure the borehole with bricks, the rock, or anything that would stabilize the hole. And they got down to 60 feet and again 13 feet diameter. And this is nothing like what our wells are now. Our current wells are about 1,000 foot deep with 16-inch casing and a screen down towards the bottom. And this is a location of where this well is. Next to, we have a water treatment plant there, and it's in an old historic neighborhood in El Paso called Chihuahua. And this is a well that was constructed next to the river, so you're going to have a very shallow water table. But what they really liked about the well is that the got rid of the mud problem, the silt problem from the river. You know, the river back then was untamed. There was not an upstream dam, so flooding from the snow melt, drought, and then when it did flow, it was full of fine sediments that actually looked like chocolate mud. So in the 1900s, if you had money and you didn't really like the water in El Paso, you would purchase it, and it would come from Deming, New Mexico, in a barrel like this, and it'd be over 100 miles. So that was a sign of affluence back in the time. So now we're going to take a kind of a whirlwind tour of what El Paso water was doing and link it into current events of the day. And 1914 was World War I. At the time, it was called the Great War, and this is the first war that had airplanes. So there's those biplanes, the Southwestern Camel, those kind of things. And they also used mustard gas. The war started when they assassinated the Archduke of Ferdinand. All the nations of the world, major nations, started into this battle. El Paso Water at the time said, you know, we're tired of the Rio Grande. It's muddy, it's unpredictable. We like groundwater, and we figured out a way to drill wells, and we like groundwater because it's cleaner than the river, and we could construct wells where people were living, and that's how we built our infrastructure in supplying waters through additional wells. Okay, next current event. We have Pearl Harbor, 1941. Japanese attack on the Pearl Harbor of Hawaii. The attack lasted about 50 minutes. Over 1,200 Americans were killed. And what's happening in El Paso? We, as a result of World War II and more troops to our military, our Fort Bliss, we built a canal water treatment plant. This was allowing us to capture more water from the river, an additional water supply project. Okay, here's our next slide. I gave this presentation earlier to a younger college group, and I asked them if they knew who these two were, and most of them knew who the lady was, Marilyn Monroe, glamorous actress of the day, but most of the college students didn't know this baseball player, Joe DiMaggio. And if they didn't know either one of these people, I would say that's Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift. But 1950s, what are we doing in El Paso? We have a drought of record. That means that the river flow was very minimal. We were receiving 6 inches of water per acre. And we all know that we can't grow anything with 6 inches of water. We need 3 to 4 feet of water. 6 inches is nothing. In fact, we couldn't even run our downtown river water plant because of the limited flow. So what El Paso did is actually drill and constructed wells in the Canutillo well field. That's that upper red dot. We actually discharged these wells into the riverbed, and this flow, we created an artificial river, and this river floated down to our water treatment plant, and it added to our supply during this severe drought condition. All right, now we're here at the 1960s. We have the Beatles, we have John, Paul, George, and Ringo. I have a few of their records, and they changed music history. And what are we doing in El Paso? Well, this is a picture of a typical house in El Paso. You can see the big, huge lawn. Of a sign of civic pride is they have that large lawn, green, lots of water to make it green here in El Paso. No regard for water conservation. And in fact, if your house was green enough and pretty enough, you might get a prize and a little trophy from the newspaper. So that was kind of the culture back then. 1970s, what is El Paso? Well, the current event is Richard Nixon, Watergate. he actually resigned from office because of the Watergate scandal. El Paso, 1970s. As our city is growing, we are meeting those demands by adding more and more to our well field. We are expanding our wells, drilling wells where people are living, and this is how we're supplying and meeting demand. It means more and more groundwater. Okay, 1989, the current event of the 80s was the fall of the Berlin Wall. This is a wall that separated East Germany from West Germany. I actually had a friend from college that was from West Germany, and he was very excited about this day. So 1980s, what's happening in El Paso? Well, our quest for water supply for our customers had us consider the idea of drilling wells in New Mexico. The state of New Mexico was not in favor of this. They said, you're taking our resource, you're impairing, you are restricting our economic development by taking our groundwater. This elevated all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said New Mexico is right. Texas is not allowed to take that groundwater. So back in the day, in the early 1980s, our water supply diversity extended itself to say, let's get New Mexico groundwater. I say that facetiously, but that really never worked. And this failed effort led us to what we call, it was a birth of our diversified water supply portfolio, which I'll start talking. But let me just kind of describe the trend as we fell in love with groundwater in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, because groundwater is fresh, it's clean, it's inexpensive for us, and we just started pumping it more and more and more to supply the needs of our public. One of the things that we noticed in the early 1980s is that our groundwater was starting to decline. And so we said, this is not really sustainable. But you can see from this red line, this extended trend of groundwater production that would have happened if we didn't do something. The yellow line that you see here in this graph is when we built the Jonathan Rogers water treatment plant. This is a plant that captures water from the Rio Grande, a sustainable, renewable resource. And as a result of building this plant, we're able to reduce the amount of pumping from the Waco Olson aquifer. So this was very wise water resource management that we did way back in the early 1990s. And that if you look at the upper portion of this line on the right, it's over 120,000 acre feet per year from the Waco Olson. And I know, and any hydrologist knows that that is not sustainable. So right now we're pumping anywhere from 40 to 60,000 acre feet per year from this. And the other side of the coin in terms of groundwater pumping and river use is this figure here. This yellow line again is the Jonathan Rogers water treatment plant. And to the right are the decades or the years after the plant was built, and we're pumping lots and lots of river water. However, we are subject to drought just like other places are. And you can see in 2013 and even last year, drought, 2021 was a drought. And when we have drought, we have to pump more and more groundwater. And that includes the use of our desalination plant. So this is our current look today, really. We are really reliant on groundwater, as I've mentioned throughout the presentation. If you look on the top left, that's our Canutillo well field. If you live on the west side of El Paso, these wells are supplying our customers with groundwater year round. And then I live on the east side of those mountains. Those mountains in the middle are the Franklin Mountains. And we are supplied with, if you live on that side, you are supplied with groundwater from the Waco Olson, or it could be a river water when the river is flowing, either from March through October in a full supply year, or June and July in a drought year. And then if you look to the right side, you see that kind of orangish dot. That's our desalination plant, which uses reverse osmosis to create a groundwater supply from desalting. This is an illustration that shows our aquifers. The aquifers do not stop at the state boundary or international boundary. The one in yellow is the Mesilla Basin. It's in Texas, in Mexico, and Mexico. And the one in red is our Waco Basin. The Waco Basin, again, Texas, New Mexico, and Mexico. Some of the management challenges that we've had for the Waco Basin are water level decline and brackish water intrusion. What we have done to preserve and maintain the Waco Basin is we built a surface water treatment plant, reduced our groundwater pumping. We have built an aquifer recharge program, and we have our desalination plant. All of these things are helping preserve and maintain the Waco Basin as a resource that we can use for generations to come. But as you remember from my previous slide with that upward trend of pumping, that was not a sustainable trend. So we're doing everything we can to manage the Waco for the long term. Now I'm going to shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about our water supply in terms of the Rio Grande. The Rio Grande is a very important supply for El Paso, but like a lot of the West, we've been subject to drought. And when I talk about drought for El Paso water, it's how much water we get from this Elephant Butte reservoir. The reservoir is located 120 miles north of El Paso, and this reservoir is supported with the snowpack in southern Colorado and northern New Mexico mountains. For a good snowpack, we need up to 500 inches of snow per year. And as we're going to talk about, the reservoir's been running low right now. It's at 10% or 90% empty. And it's because we have not been having good snowpacks over the last 20 years. So here is a 70-year snapshot of what the volumes in Elephant Butte Reservoir have been, starting on the left, the 1950s. We have the drought of record of the 1950s. Then we have the 60s and 70s kind of in and out of drought. And if you go to the far right side, we're in and out of drought. And that's very similar to the pattern of the 60s and 70s. So, but what happens in the middle is this wonderful sequence of big, huge snowpacks for probably 2 decades. And that's when we're getting 500 inches of snow up in the mountains every year. And the reservoir was full. And when I first came here, I talked to the operators at our water plants, and they said, oh yeah, for 20 years, every year, we've been running river water in our system from March through all of October. And now, subject to the drought conditions that we're facing on the right-hand side of this chart, it's a question every year. Right now, we're asking you, how much snow is in the mountains? The lake is very low right now. When are we going to get river water? In fact, these last few years, when the river finally decides to make its way to El Paso as late as June, we actually are out there with our cameras filming it, and it's on the local news. That's how excited we are to get our river water. This is a chart that shows the inflow to the Rio, on the Rio Grande to Elephant Butte last few years. And suffice to say that it's been pretty low. Occasionally we'll have a spike like we did in 2023, representing a decent snowpack, but it has been just a dismal snowpack in general for the last 20 years. Speaking of snowpack, this is our watershed. Those orange areas show that our snowpack is currently 50% of normal. Coupled again with our low reservoir volume right now, it means that our river supply this coming season is going to be very limited. I'm anticipating that we're going to get river in June and maybe ending in July, anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks. And our weather is still very hot. And that means we'll have to meet all of our city demand with groundwater. And again, that includes pumping from our 2 aquifers and our desalination plant. Further dismal climate report. The seasonal precipitation outlook is below normal. This picture shows the temperatures are hot. So we got hot weather, low precip, low snowpack, low lake volumes, it means drought, and we got to have our wells pumping and ready. This is a picture of the Elephant Butte Reservoir. Again, I mentioned that it is 120 miles north of El Paso, and this is our key metric on whether or not El Paso water is facing the drought. So somebody's about 110 years ago thought that mountain there looked like an elephant, so hence the name Elephant Butte. And as you can tell on this mountain, there's no bathtub rains. So this lake is full, 2.1 million acre feet. Okay, let's go to the next one. This next slide here, it shows what the lake looks like now in a drought condition. You can see the water level against that Elephant Mountain is much, much lower. And so right now, again, we're at 10% or 90% empty. So here's a little description of our desalination plant. We built the plant in 2007. It has a capacity of 27.5 million gallons a day. And in this picture is the Senator Hutchison. She was instrumental in us get a $25 million EPA grant. That's the mayor of El Paso, and then Ed Archuleta is on the left, previously the president of El Paso Water. So here's my favorite photo of the desalination plant infrastructure. And we have our RO plant. We have 5 reverse osmosis skids. And again, our capacity is 27 million gallons a day. In source wells, we have 16 source wells that feed the plant. And the water that we're desalting is anywhere from 3,000 to 4,000 TPS. And after we go through the RO process, we have a very aggressive permeate. The permeate is too aggressive for us to put into our pipeline. So what we do is we blend the permeate with the blend water. So we're actually adding water and salts to make a finished water. Again, the finished water at full capacity is 27.5 million gallons a day. A finished water concentration of about 600 milligrams per liter TDS. It's not as fresh as Southern Lake California water, but it's pretty fresh for us. And then the other important component of the desalination plant is your concentrate. Anytime you do any desalting, the biggest challenge, in my opinion, is you got to get rid of the concentrate. The concentrate we dispose of is pumped 22 miles away from our plant. We have a 16-inch pipeline. We have 3 injection wells. They are constructed to a depth of 4,000 feet. We're injecting, and I know you were concerned about seismicity, but in this case, we are not using any kind of pump to mechanically force or pressurize the water into the formation. It actually accepts the water under vacuum conditions as if it was thirsty, but we're not building up pressure to inject this water. And at full capacity, we're injecting 3 million gallons a day of concentrate. Our concentrate from this process is about 15,000 TDS. Okay, here's a picture of where the deep wells are. Now, as we go into the future, we do have a water plan. This is our wizard. We our 50-year water plan. It's a 50-year water plan that we have to update every 5 years. And in this water plan, we look at current population growth, existing water supply, and projected water demands. In the event that future demands exceed future supplies, we need to add additional water supply strategy. As part of the water planning process, the state suffered a severe drought in the early 1990s. As a result, they created legislation which created 16 water planning districts with very strict chapters in their book, if you will. All the state regions have to prepare a state water plan that addresses population growth, water demands, water management strategies. So every region of Texas has to prepare a water plan. And in order to be eligible for state funding, the project has to be the state water plan. So it's a great incentive to participate in this planning process to get your projects listed with the state and to be eligible for state. So this is a part of the planning process. We show a population projection, our growth. And yes, we're expected to grow. And as a result, we need additional water for our customers. The 4 water supply projects that we have in our state water plan are conservation. Yes, conservation counts as a supply. And we have the advanced water purification. That's a big, fancy, long term. Our marketing people said, let's make it shorter, easier to understand. So it's called pure water. That's easier to understand. And we have our Waco Olson Aquifer Recharge program. And we have groundwater from Del City. This is an importation project. The water is about 100 miles away. And as I mentioned earlier, it's not from New Mexico. It is from Texas. So this is a diagram that shows the benefits in our advancements in water conservation. In the late 1980s, when we weren't conserving, and remember that house from the 1960s, lots of green grass, a flat fee for everybody's houses, our per capita water use was 205 gallons per customer per day. And with our water conservation program that really started in the early 1990s, you can see on this chart that we've just continually declined in our per capita demand. And you can see that we have still work to do in terms of lowering it. And as we work towards lowering it, we have various programs or incentives that raise our customers' attention. We in the past have done some zero-scape initiatives, turf abatement. When I moved to El Paso, I got rid of my grass, and the turf abatement program had just ended. So I lost out on that, but I don't have to mow the grass anymore. Then there's also these other things, toilets, HVAC. These are all improvements that can help us conserve water. And if we think of water conservation as a supply, it is the cheapest form of new water. So conservation is always key. So this is a slide where we're going to talk about our future. That is purified water. Purified water is water that we, the beginning of a purified water project is water that's been wastewater that's been treated to meet irrigation standards. And then with technology, we're going to run it through 4 more levels of treatment to create a purified water supply. And when we talk about this process, we want to talk about the quality of the water, not so much about the history of the water. And we're feeling that El Paso and many other communities, the effluent is being recognized as a really valuable resource. And I think this is an example of the value that effluent has in the community. So as we talk about the purified water process, it goes through these levels of treatment. We have membrane filtration, reverse osmosis, we have advanced oxidation, granular activated carbon, and chlorine disinfection. So if you want to think of belt and suspenders and another belt, you get the picture. And the TCEQ, our regulatory agencies, they're very much interested and very much watchful of what we're doing. And everything we do to make this plant work is they're watching. And when built, this plant will have 10 MTD of supply. And we started groundbreaking, a year ago, February of last year. So we're building the plant. And by 2029, we will finish our commissioning. And that's when we expect to be using it into our system. Waco Olson Recharge. We're actually working at expanding our recharge basins to allow more and more recharge. This is a great way to maintain water levels and preserve our aquifer for future use. And Del City, this is our groundwater importation project. We have acquired over 70,000 acres of land, about 100 miles east of El Paso. The water out here is some of it's salty, some of it's fresh. We're going to start off with fresh water at first. And then as we go more and more into this project, we will desalt, and we will desalt water out there at Del City. And as we go into the future, we can see that El Paso's water supply will be diversified. We will still use Rio Grande. We will have our Waco Wilson aquifer, our Mesilla aquifer, desalination, importation, and other, I think, can be considered as pure water projects or reuse projects. So as El Paso goes into the future, innovation and water supply diversity are what are needed to help us meet the satisfaction of our customers. And that concludes my presentation. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Scott. We do have some time for questions, if
Okay.
there are any. Yep. I will run the microphone.
Scott, Carl Longley, thanks for giving us your
Hi, Carl.
presentation. As I recall, you had some problems with your injection wells, and then a separate topic. Could you describe in a little bit what you folks are doing on material recovery?
Oh, yeah. Nice to see you, Carl. Sorry I couldn't join you. And if you had told me there's wine tasting, I would have been out there. Just kidding. I wanted to go, but it just didn't quite work out. But it looks like you're having a great conference. Our injection wells, as we might have discussed, I feel like they are, if you think of it as a reservoir, the reservoir is really, really great. We don't have to mechanically pressurize the water to fit down there. Now, if I lamented and to you, which I may have said our injection wells are subject to they're highly regulated. And what has happened is we have a little leak in our casing. So we got to address that before we can use that injection well. But I call that a mechanical problem that we're going to fix with a $1.2 million casing liner installation. So we're actually going to put a smaller pipe within the injection well. A new injection well will cost about $10 million, but it's important that we fix it. But I want to get back to the point that we don't feel in any way that our reservoir has diminished its capability of receiving our concentrate. This is like a leaking pipe that we got to fix. The injection reservoir is robust. Now, the other question is one that I'm very much interested in. That is the minerals recovery at the plant next door to our desalination plant. It's originally started in 2018. It's been tricky. It's a challenging process. They, to my knowledge, have about 4 or 5 different levels of treatment. There's seawater RO. There's lots of fancy equipment beneath that, and 5 different treatment technologies that allow them to separate various minerals from the market: gypsum, hydrochloric acid, caustic, lithium. Lithium is a up and coming market, and these would all be sold to various markets. And instead of disposing of these salts, you're selling the salts. So it's a great concept that everyone is interested in. Because it's not fully working. It's a challenge. I'll put it that way. But we're very much interested, and I do believe that this is the future of England resolving these some form of minerals recovery. That's all I got on that one, Carl.
Hi, Scott. This is Pei Xu with New Mexico State University.
Oh, man, everybody's there.
Yeah, we just miss you.
Yeah.
Yes,
Hi.
Scott. Thank you so much for the excellent presentation. And that makes our next session discussion so much easier about the brine treatment and the valorization. So I will talk about our pilot testing that we are doing at the K. Bailey Hutchinson desalination plant. Thank you for supporting our project. I have a question, still it's related to the brine disposal, because I remember you mentioned that the salinity in the groundwater of the brine receiving aquifer actually is increasing. Do you think that the aquifer could continuously receive the brine for maybe the next 30, 50 years? Because right now, I think the groundwater aquifer is classified as drinking water aquifer. If the salinity increase to over 10,000 milligram per liter, it may exceed the permitting waiver.
Okay, so the host water that we're injecting into, the
Right,
injection-
yes.
yeah, the TDS of that formation is 8,000 milligrams per liter. And our early groundwater modeling said that after 50 years of injection, the TDS might raise up to 10,000. We have a completed what's called an aquifer exemption permit, which is a waiver on the water quality, any water quality requirements for our injection. And it's a recognition that it's a very deep and remote, and then also recognizing that 8,000 TDS right now would require considerable treatment prior to use. So the state has recognized it. So if in your discussion, if the water quality of the receiving zone, the injection zone gradually increases, it would not be restricted as per our permit. Our permit right now is only governed by the volume of water that we inject.
Oh, great. Thank you, Scott.
Uh-huh.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Scott, for joining
Yes.
us remotely. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Yes, my pleasure.